Shoma, let me just say that SomaRoy is the founder of an online learning platform called the Nourishment Projects. With her master's degree in engineering background, her presentations marry philosophy and science and draws our attention to the beauty of this world so that we may acknowledge it in others as well as within ourselves. That's beautiful, Shoma. And so Shoma, as you said to me to say, here's Shoma.
Thank you so much. A very warm welcome to everyone. It's a privilege for the Nourishment Projects to have been invited, so thank you. Congratulations and our very best wishes for a very successful 4th anniversary. From fall to spring, bloodthirsty autumn transforming into verdant green, nature is color. The Nourishment Projects is about joyous curiosity and being part of something much larger than ourselves. Here are some of the references that inform our presentation. The Nourishment Project is peer-to-peer learning, and I'm always grateful when members share information so we can all learn. Pam had sent this fascinating picture and I got curious and discovered the Japanese painter Yusuke Arai, so thank you, Pam. University was too expensive for Yusuke Arai, and so he taught himself, learned by going to the zoos, the museums. He studied tribal arts from many cultures, learning how people create things, the countless small things that come together to make our larger world. And so earth as a medium, and that's very different from the materials that are sold in art stores. Seeds grow in it, home to many insects and many organisms. It's a living medium, a feeling of connection to a place. So here is the painter Yusuke Arai at work. Local people, wherever he's invited to present, they collect dirt for him. So his art, the murals he creates, is a community project. Rice University Gallery at Houston, the mural allows visitors to interact directly with their local surrounding environments. In his mud paintings, the artist literally binds themes of nature with the physical elements of the earth. You know, I don't want to meet him. I'm simply happy that this man exists, because his beliefs reminds me of the Buddha. And here are some Buddhist monks making mandalas, and they make them with colored sand. And in the base principle, the mandala is being removed when the ceremony is over, ritually with reverence, to emphasize the impermanence of existence. That it will not last makes life so achingly sweet. And the ultimate mandala, Earth herself, ever-changing, magnificent, and glorious. We are a part of this artistry, your community more than anybody else. Where would you be without this natural world? And so we contribute, you especially, to the beauty of humanities. And quite honestly, by the mere touch of such a vision, aren't we all stained by this beauty? So, chemistry, Rainbow Mountain in China, this is art through minerals. I like to think of it as spiritual painting. Botany, physics, the Holy Trinity underpinning colors. So shall we get started? Mondrian, very recognizable, composition with red, blue, and yellow, the primary colors. That is going to be our focus for today. Deceptive in seeming simplicity, I'm going to point. So Mondrian had his theosophy really influenced his art. So for example, why isn't this black line going all the way across? The philosophy behind his paintings are very interesting, but that is not the focus today. What I'm going to start with again are the colors. Let's start at the beginning. A for adultery, scarlet letter, the color for sinners and saints, the cardinals. The church is pregnant with symbolism, red for courage and for sacrifice. It is said that the Mary Queen of Scots met her executioner in a black and red dress, and inside the sleeves of her dress, in Latin was sewn in effective, it said, "In the end is my beginning." And so she had worn black to symbolize her death, and red, her courage in meeting it. Christianity isn't the only religion that incorporates meaning into color. The Egyptian god of the underworld and rebirth. So once again, in the end is my beginning concept. The Egyptian god is Osiris, and he is known as Lord of the Red Cloth, which is what is being shown up here. This is evidence from 1975 BCE. So BCE stands for before current era. In the tomb of Wa, the sarcophagus was wrapped in white linen, with the outer layer, temple linen, was red, symbolizing eternal protection. The red was made from hematite and iron oxide. Egyptians also used the insect kermes, which is shown on the top left picture, which they imported from Persia and Mesopotamia. When Spain was ruled by Rome, half of the Spanish taxes were paid in sacks of this kermes. It was one of the most expensive dyes in the Middle Ages. They also had a plant substitute called madder, which was an extract from the rubia plant. Though it was cheaper, it did not have that rich crimson hue, and this rubia also tended to brown. In fact, it was kermes, the color that came from it, that provided the crimson velvet base for the threads of gold and double bands of pearl in this mantle for the Holy Roman Empire. This was Richard the Lionhearted's coronation robe. Another dye producer was the Polish cochineal, an insect that is a cousin of kermes. The picture on the top left is a Polish cochineal with the exuvium, which means the outer skin of the insect after molting. An early evidence of cochineal dye is the red Pazyryk rug, which is noted about 2,500 years ago. It's one of the oldest preserved rug in the world. If you Google these, because everything I'm showing through the Nourishment projects can be easily Googled, there are horsemen and deer prancing on the red field, and the red comes from the dye of the cochineal bug itself. The rug has a very interesting backstory. It was originally in a burial mound in Siberia. The tomb had been robbed of the valuables around 4th century. I guess the robbers didn't find the rug to be of any value. But what had happened after they had left the cave, the doors had been left open of the tomb. And so water had flooded in. And then because it's in Siberia, it froze. And since it froze, it was perfectly preserved in ice until it was unearthed by an archaeologist in 1949. The other insect, lac, the female secreta resin that is eventually used to make the color crimson. Lac was a part of the Silk Roads that is so famous. And as an example of lac use, this is a part of a silk carpet from the V&A Museum in London. And the red marking on here is showing that here is the lac used to get the color red of this magnificent luxury textile. Roots and shrubs were used as natural dye for Persian carpets. Dyes have to be fixed with a mordant. That is what binds a color to the fiber. This process stabilizes the dye so it won't wash out or fade away in sunlight. The same dye can produce different colors by using different mordants. A madder pant can yield red, orange, or purple. Yellow is made from saffron or weld. Blue comes from indigo. Green comes from overdying indigo with weld or cobalt with saffron. So blue and yellow makes green. So it's a marriage really of chemistry and art. There are not too many Persian carpets with natural dyes and in the color green. So if you see a green Persian carpet, you can rest assured it's rare, thereby very expensive. And so this idea of coloring with natural pigments of the Persian carpets, this is one of the most famous carpets in the world. It's the Ardabil carpet. The reason it's in the V&A. There's also a copy, not a copy, equivalent of it in the Getty Museum in LA. Reason I'm showing here, I'm going to point with my marker. This is called a brush when there is a difference in the gradient of the colors because it's a natural dye. So if you ever come across a carpet with uniform coloring, you can bet it's synthetic. This brush is a good indicator that it's naturally dyed. And carpets made of wool. This is a woolen carpet. So wool naturally is either white ivory, brown, or black. And then it is dyed. And this wool, the material, made Tudor England wealthy. So these are the times of Henry VIII, and during his time, England was coming into money because of wool, and because of money, England was coming into power. And red conveys power, the courage of sacrifice for the church. And this color symbolism was critical to Henry VIII because he was attempting to establish his own religion. There's a lot more to Henry VIII than his multiple wives. So once again, his Tudor England comes into power, huge economic power, through the wool trade in his region. Alum is a mordant. Mordant, once again, is that which makes the color stick, and mordant is essential for dyes. When Rome discovered alum deposits near Tolfa in the 15th century, the Vatican had a near monopoly on that alum. So until the Middle Ages, the French region of Champagne was known as an annual alum market. It wasn't known for the bubbly drink we all celebrate. And so to counter the Catholic alum monopoly, Henry VIII, whose wool industry needed alum, is said to have married his fourth wife, Anne of Cleves, to get access to areas with alum that was ruled by her brother, William. And then two papal, and by papal I mean read Catholic, alum workers were smuggled to England to learn how to extract alum from shale. So all those cliffs by Dover, all those cliffs by Yorkshire, those areas were very rich of shale. So these alum workers showed the English how to extract mordant. So art is married to politics, simply for the eternal reason because there's money in there. Henry VIII also established the color red for the British military, once again to emphasize power. Eventually the redcoats, and in their very recognizable current form. But just one generation away, Henry's daughter, Elizabeth I, had to tread very carefully with colors. On the left, which is the self-portrait, red surrounds her, but not explicitly on her. The scarlet red, associations with the concept of the fallen, the adultery, and also, as previously from the Nathaniel Hawthorne, the scarlet letter. Because Elizabeth I, her birth, her rule was viewed illegitimate by Catholic Spain, Catholic Rome, Catholic France, and her rivals in every perspective. Let's not forget her other sister, Mary Queen of Scots. She was Catholic. That's who France and Spain and Italy supported. So the color was significant for her. Her brand, the Virgin Queen, was to establish authority. And she had a very disciplined approach. The self-portrait, Sev again, is for symbolizing virginity and purity. If you transition over to the picture or the painting on the right, that's the Armada portrait, done later when the English had defeated the Spanish. And it was a significant victory for England. And so now when she's portrayed, if in the background of that painting, one sees the ships in the background for the Armada, red is more central in this painting. It's closer to the paraphrase and sprinkled on her. So colors played a huge part in her branding. This painting should have had, sorry, can you still see my screen?
Yes, it's
yes.
the tuner.
I don't know why I can't see it. I'm so sorry. I have to pull up my screen again. I apologize. I'm going to stop share and bring it back up. I don't know what happened to my screen. Are we back on then?
Yes.
I'm very sorry. I don't know why it suddenly stopped. So as I was saying, this painting should have had a streak of color in a sunset sky and not this gray wash over a dull afternoon. The sun's last rays were supposed to hit the clouds, but really has faded into memory, rather like the carmine pigment that was used by Joseph Mallard William Turner, the very famous English painter. Here are some of the pigments that Turner used, and Turner's paint box reveals a color, red lead, made from heating white lead. It's also called minium, and it's almost orange. This orange is very readily visible in the painting on the left-hand side. And on the right, one realizes is Jackie Kennedy's visit to India. Jackie Kennedy loved the company paintings of India. So the company paintings is a term given to the paintings commissioned by the British East India Company when they ruled India. And the Indian miniature paintings are actually known as miniature paintings, not because of the size, because they're not really miniature. It's called miniature because the minium that was used to create red. The red is obviously very prevalent in this painting, and many of the paintings that are in these labeled miniature paintings because of the minium, not because of the size. And I actually do love these miniature paintings because they remind me of Bruegel's work, although I think Bruegel's work is much more nuanced. Another very signature identifier of England are the post boxes, the red post boxes. And yet one of the first things that was altered in 1997 when Hong Kong was returned to China was to repaint them green. The new coat of paint was a gentle reminder of the end of an empire in the Far East. Another signature Turner color is vermilion, the manufactured form of cinnabar. It's very often seen in the Chinese lacquers. One can also make vermilion by taking equal parts of mercury and white sulfur and heating it until the yellow smoke becomes vermilion colored. So regarding mercury, Almaden in Spain is known for mercury mines. And due to the human toxicity of mercury and its toxic byproducts, the mine has variously employed penal labor, slave labor, and prisoners of war over its very long history. You know, art history really won't withstand levels of ethical scrutiny. The art market is full of dirty, pretty things. But the Almaden mine had been stopped from working from 2002 because of the prohibition of mercury mining in Europe. So in 2006, the mines were open to the public as an educational aspect, and one could visit the first levels about 50 meters underground. Vermilion is also the signature color of Temple 13, the tomb of the Red Queen, Lady Zakbu Ahau, spelled A-J-A-W, and these are her funerary monuments, which is known as Temple 13. They contained the limestone sarcophagus, and the interior of which, as is obvious in the right-hand side picture, was painted with the crimson cinnabar. Following her interment in the sarcophagus, her body and accompanying ornaments and offerings were also covered with a thick layer of cinnabar. Understandably dubbed the Red Queen, this burial is one of the richest known for a female Mayan ruler. She wore a headband composed of 2 rows of circular discs made of fine apple green jade, which is most prized by the Mayans. The mask over her face, made of malachite, has limestone and obsidian eyes that appear to bore right into you, conveying a striking sense of the presence of the queen. Framed by the cinnabar red vermilion, it's such a symbolic for her ending. But vermilion is essential for a commencement also, a beginning of a commitment. The Indian wedding ceremony, red adorns the bride. Yes, that's me, because if I'm going to show an Indian wedding, it would make more sense to have my own picture. And vermilion is the symbol of a married Hindu woman. They would put vermilion in the middle of the parting. And another aspect of getting this red is the cochineal. And in this case, the painting on the left is from the Newberry Library, a wonderful library in the downtown Chicago. And cochineal is the economic lifebulb. I mean, it was the economic lifebulb of Spain. Britain tried to find and manufacture the color. And William Roxburgh, who used to be the superintendent of the Royal Botanical Gardens of Calcutta when British ruled India, and the Royal Botanical Gardens was part of the entire Botanical Garden series, of which now is also the most famous one is Kew Gardens. They had tried for years to cultivate the insects. Growing the cactus was easy. They had unfortunately smuggled the inferior cochineal insect from Brazil. So Britain really didn't succeed in, cultivating this insect. I must point out that the famed and renowned Royal Botanical Gardens, Kew Gardens included, were as much a part of an economic strategy of England as it was legitimately renowned for research, conservation, and beauty. So, Manila galleons. Spain controlled the market for cochineal. And I think it's very important to see the holistic view of history. So this red dye was extremely lucrative for Spain. And just north of Mexico, because the cochineals come from Mexico, Oaxaca, was America. And to get cochineal, we had to pay huge taxes, because the way that it worked was the cochineal traveled from Mexico, Oaxaca, it traveled east by ship to Spain. Then it traveled west back to America, so that at every stop, count up all the taxes. And the Manila galleon has a very, very interesting history. There were trade ships from Acapulco, Mexico to Manila, to Lisbon, Spain, I'm sorry. And because Spain controlled those areas then. I think they controlled it until 1816. And then 1898, Philippines becomes a territory of the United States. And that's why we have those, what is called the Manila envelopes, because of the connection from Manila, Philippines. Philippines was guaranteed independence by the United States around 1946 after World War II. So cochineal and color plays a huge history in politics and economics. And I encourage you to Google all this stuff up. It's fascinating history. And I brought it up because we are circling back to Spain and to the concept again of the Scarlet Letter. In this case, it's one of the most famous paintings. I'm sure you're very, very familiar with it. Velázquez's Las Meninas, 1656 painting. But the focus for me is this idea of acceptance. Either Philip IV, who was his patron, or Velázquez himself, I'm going to point now, later painted in this red cross right there. Because in the original, when the painting was completed, that cross was not there. And it's the cross of the Knights of the Santiago. It's a symbol for Spanish knighthood. So Velázquez was granted the noble status in 1658. And this cross was painted probably in 1659 onto the painting. Velázquez died in 1660. It's this idea of the Scarlet Letter, about this association with acceptance that interests me. In Nathaniel Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter, the red letter A was about ostracizing somebody. But in this case, look at Velázquez. It was so significant for him, right? He had all the money, all the fame, all the adulation. But until and unless he got that red symbol on him, he felt absolutely unaccepted. So the scarlet symbol has two entirely different meanings, pivoting around the concept of acceptance or lack thereof. Now, acceptance on an entirely different level, love. Here is Titian's Bacchus and Ariadne and the blue horizon. Per Ovid, the Greek Theseus has deserted his lover, Ariadne, on the island of Naxos. There she is on the left-hand side of the painting, standing at the seashore, watching his ship sail away without her, when all of a sudden, this chariot appears, pulled by two cheetahs. And I love the cheetahs. I want to point to them. Look at them, looking at each other like, why are we here? So the story goes, Bacchus, the Roman god Dionysus, he's returning from a swell party in India. I'm from India. I didn't know they had such swell parties. So Bacchus and his revelers are returning from India, and he spots Ariadne, falls instantly in love, madly in love, leaping out of the chariot, saying, "Forget that wretch, madam, choose me. I'll give you the sky and the stars, because look up, there's the northern constellation above her head." And there she is, looking at him, just dumbfounded. Look at her expression. It's like, what on earth? Do you think she chooses him? Read Ovid. That is what blue represents, doesn't it? The allure. Follow your passions. See where it leads. Hints Titian. Perhaps your courage will be crowned. And be it there's your sky or the ocean, it is about really the horizon of possibilities, because one always has a choice. There are always possibilities. It's that what blue represents to me. It's what awaits in the tantalizing beyond. Beyond the sea, Ultramarino, the quintessential blue for master painters. Initially, it was termed Ultramarino. The term applied to everything that came from beyond the sea. And in this case, that sea happened to be the Mediterranean. Eventually, it settles down on the paint, ultramarine. And that has an entirely beguiling history. So the painting, Our Lady, the Star of the Sea, Stella Maris by Leonardo da Vinci's Madonna on the Rocks. Though recognized now with the blue of the sea, the Virgin Mary historically had a very, very large wardrobe. The Russians garbed her in red, 7th century Byzantines in purple, and sometimes she's often in white. In 15th century Holland, Mary wore scarlet, black in grief. Again, Da Vinci, Madonna of the Carnations, definitely red is the color there. In the Sumela monastery in Turkey, garnet, the color of Christ. Actually, you know, during the first millennia, as Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, and it started spreading into Europe, Mary was typically portrayed as an imperial figure, the equal of emperors, dressed in royal purple and gold. In the second millennia, beginning in the 12th century, Mary underwent a dramatic shift, evolving into a more accessible, kinder, gentler maternal figure. She became more maternal than monarch, because most likely she served as a substitute mother in monasteries and convents, because the novices who entered at a very, very tender age. So a mother's love came to express the core of the religious story. But colors are significant. There we see Saint John, signified by the color pink. And by the time of Van der Weyden, Mary's transformation to motherhood is utterly complete. There's a very interesting book by Combe Toybin, The Testament of Mary. And there she's a very relatable human mother. In this painting, she's now in a recognized color, blue. The Queen of Heaven in the color of heaven, pale blue. Van der Weyden's compositions is so contemporary. Each figure framed with the backdrop of sacrifice and courage in red. That unfinished figure on the bottom right would have been Mary had Michelangelo's ultramarine blue arrived on time from the Silk Roads, from Afghanistan. So when one thinks of European masters, as I'm sure you're very familiar with, do please include Afghanistan into your geography. Titian, Vermeer, even Dürer, all dependent on the largest of their patrons to acquire this color, ultramarine. And so where does it reside? Northeast Afghanistan, Badakhshan region, in the form of lapis lazuli. Some call it lazuli, so either way. Risking mine collapse and bronchitis, digging inside lapis mines for marble. White marble flecked gloriously with blue. So in the past, miners lit fires under the rocks and then threw icy water over it. So this water had to be carried up from the rivers way below by very fit young men. It was grueling effort. So shocked by these extreme temperatures, the rocks would crack and then the miners would uncover lapis. The whole place was perfumed with the scent of burning firs. These tunnels are blackened with soot from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Even now, men in turbans with guns everywhere. We see some of them probably returning with pieces of lapis, because all these areas, by the way, are controlled by warlords. In today's equivalents, Afghanistan has $3 trillion worth of minerals, gold, emerald, lapis, etc. By the way, that is one of the primary reasons that the Renaissance Virgin Mary is in blue. It's because of the expense of the color. The Byzantine choice of purple for Mary was because the dye, purple, was expensive. Tyrian purple came from mollusks. It was a very, very smelly and time-consuming process to create the color purple from mollusks, and it was reserved for royalty. In fact, Queen Elizabeth's coronation gown, it's purple. In some cultures, historically, if you wore purple and you were not royalty, the penalty was death. And so by the 13th century, ultramarine had arrived as the most expensive color on the market. And so a most precious symbol of the Christian faith, Mary, is garbed in the most expensive color during the time, blue. Color is very, very symbolic. For a desert religion like Islam, the idea of paradise is green. And so the cloak of the Prophet Muhammad is green, and green is the color of Islam. Colors are rich with symbolism historically across the world. So now back to blue. Why is blue expensive? This turbaned Afghan with lapis, his place certainly doesn't look like an abode of opulence. So again, why is it so expensive? Well, historically, eternally, it is because of the most precious commodity in the world, time. Lapis is a complex clump of mineral, which includes sodalite, lazurite, and in the best grade, there is more sulfur, which is what provides that absolutely desired violet shade. If calcium carbonate is present, the lapis turns more gray. So to achieve ultramarine, the color maker is a baker, lovingly kneading a dough of finely powdered lapis, resin, gum, and linseed oil for up to 3 days. To coax out the blue, our artist cook puts this stone dough into a bowl of wood ash and water and kneads it with 2 sticks, squeezing and pressing it for hours until the liquid is saturated with blue. He then separates this blue liquid into a clean bowl, and it is definitely a he, not a she. It's men who work this miracle, and lets it dry into a powdery pigment. And then he starts all over again with wood ash, which is called lye, and uses the previous resin and starts again. It is the first press, the virgin press, which is the best press, a virgin pressing for the virgin's crown. And all the subsequent pressings will be less valuable. And through this labor-intensive process and the alchemy of time, a turbaned gentleman like this made this turbaned character possible. Vermeer was liberal in his use of ultramarine. I have no idea who his patron was. He must have been lavish in loving Vermeer. So Bamiyan, now more famed for the absent Buddhas, is in the areas of Afghanistan that we are discussing. Afghanistan used to be for almost a millennia a Buddhist center. On the left-hand side, it's referring to the statues that the Taliban had blown up in 2011. And now these statues have become a picture of haunting suffering. In the most ironic way, the Taliban had managed to capture the essence of Buddhism anyway, right? Buddhism is about that life has suffering. So they almost did Buddhism symbolically a favor. Not a favor, but you know what I mean. Anyway, when they were created, these statues were said to have had wooden arms that were raised by chains and pulleys for the mudra of blessing, where the Buddha raises the right hand. It's a sign of a mudra, is a hand symbol, a symbol of blessing. Otherwise, these statues, they were plain stucco statues and used to have a halo of blue around it, which makes sense because of all the lapis that surrounds this area. And so for centuries, I'm going to point to it. It's alluding to these camel caravans going back and forth because these are the famed roads of the proverbial Silk Roads. And so these products traveled through these areas from the nearby mines of Messina. Copper traveled from Persia across these exact roads, traveled the other color, blue. In this case, what the Chinese call Mohammedan blue, cobalt. And the Mohammedan blue is what the Chinese craved. And they traded their celadon, which is that gray-green stone, for this blue. This Persian cobalt made Chinese Ming vases possible. History is fascinating, especially for painters. The more you pick a color and you learn its history, the whole world becomes open to us. Really worth looking into. And speaking of looking into, X-ray spectroscopy, it's the study of wavelengths. Physics reveals the chemistry of color. Here's Bruegel's Two Monkeys, a profound allegory. And here is the chemical composition. We now are going to approach the aspect of the story, which is about the gateway to a story of greed, evil, and the forensic of science. In 1936, this is a painting by Mazurel on the topic of supper at Emmaus. I'm sure some of you have seen Caravaggio's version of this painting. So Mazurel had done this in the World War II area. Mazurel was a forger from Netherlands. He had diligently studied the methods of the master Vermeer, the paints Vermeer used, the canvas that he used, the process. You might actually very validly call Mazurel a scholar, but he used his profound understanding to create fakes, and he sold them obviously as authentic items. Since real Vermeers, during those times of World War II, most masterpieces anyway, were hidden from Nazi avarice, experts didn't have much to compare to, and so his deception wasn't caught. One of Mazurel's buyers was Hitler's right-hand man, Göring. But Mazurel, the fraudster, he was frauded, which is apparent from his paint box. Spectroscopy revealed that there was cobalt in his ultramarine of the paintings that he used. And during Vermeer's time, there was no cobalt. And so when they did the testing of the paints that was used in Mazurel's painting, they realized through chemistry that his paintings were a fake, which is actually very relevant to the story of Mazurel, because once they realized, the Allies are the ones who helped realize, how come so many Vermeers are popping up? It was his greed that gave him away. And so once caught, as we move the story forward, Mazurel had to prove his artistry while he was imprisoned. And the painting you see in the back was what he was asked to paint to prove that, did you really paint this? That painting of Christ at supper eventually sold for a fortune too. And so by the time he was freed, actually, Mazurel he had amassed a fortune, which at today's rate, his fortune would have been about $90 million. But the funniest part of the entire story of Mazurel was that he was released as a hero because he had duped the Nazis, that he had sold the Nazis fake paintings. That is not what he had actually started out to do, but history is funny. The reason he's included in the story is because he got caught because of his ultramarine, because it was not true ultramarine. It's the mystery of the lapis. But ultramarine reveals much more than fakes. It's really a roster of art history. So miners had built the Sarasang mines 7 millennia ago. So once upon a time, this area was a blue rock garden awaiting for people to enjoy it. So let's walk through history in these mines. In the first 50 to 60 feet, these were the stones that went to the Egyptian tombs. Remember the Egyptian tombs? They can see the women with the blue eyeshadows and the blue in their painting. The color came from these mines in the first 50 or 60 meters. As you mine further, so historically we're working further in, these stones now provided the blue around the halo of the Bamyan Buddhas. venture further forward. The minds are now illuminating the Bibles, illuminated manuscripts of Armenia. As we venture further forward, we encounter the ultramarine that painted Titian's Ariadne and Bacchus. As we keep lurching forward, perhaps that is the stone that didn't reach Michelangelo, that he couldn't finish his painting. But one wonders, why was there a delay? Was it a bad year for mining? Had it become too dangerous to dig? Was it the weather? If we keep going further and further into the mines, here comes Rubens, Poisson. You keep going further in, down to the French painter Jacques Mazurel. It was lapis that influenced Jacques Mazurel, which is now better known as Yves Saint Laurent's garden in Morocco. Lapis lazuli, speckled with iron pyrite, fool's gold. It's that enchantment of blue. You see it everywhere. The more you look, the more you see. And I would now like to use this painting from Mazurel to transition to the other color that's significant here, yellow. Yellow is also associated with Krishna, who is known as the blue god of India. Shown here in the painting, he's the one holding up Mount Govardhan, big part of mythology of India. Let's focus on the yellow now. Krishna, in his beginning of his story, was a cow herder. And so women painting cows, because Krishna, the beloved god of India, one of the beloved gods of India, was a cow herder. And cow is significant for the color because it is the urine of cows that had been exclusively fed a diet of mango leaves that produced that color yellow. The practice has since been banned. So here are cakes of Indian yellow. Here's a cake for which taste testing I will not volunteer. And it is the same Indian yellow that shows up in the Starry Night. Other materials used to create yellow are turmeric, jackfruit, and the monks' robe, the Buddhist monks, because remember, they're mendicants, they went around begging. And so the monks used what they could find to dye the donated cloth. So they had to beg for everything, food and clothing. And this yellow ochre, it's naturally available. That is one of the reasons monks wear these color. They would wash it in colors that are naturally available, colors of the earth. Gambo's yellow, I am sure you're very, very familiar with it. It comes from the Garcinia tree, and we are now in the botany of colors. The term gamboge comes from the original term for Cambodia, kombucha. The resin of the tree is tapped through a deep gash in the tree trunk, and it's then collected in the hollowed out bamboo. It drips in that hollow of the bamboo for over a year. And once it's dried, they crack the bamboos open and you will have the gamboge pigment. If you run a wet paintbrush over this uninspiring brownish lump, it will, as you obviously well know, release the brightest yellow imaginable. It's almost fluorescent. It sounds rather simple, making this color, but as humans, we complicate everything. On the left-hand side, we see a picture of a Garcinia Evergreen. This is a picture from the tree in Japan, because it's very prevalent everywhere in Southeast Asia. But in Cambodia, it's not really simple as meandering into a wood and collecting gamboge, because those groves used to be riddled with landmines, thanks to the Khmer Rouge regime in the 1970s. So Winsor and Newton, terms you're very familiar with, the labs have samples of bullets that were found in the bamboo resin holders. So what most likely happened is that some soldier must have come into the groves and sprayed the entire area and also the people with bullets from machine guns. Our history can be so disheartening. But as far as the use of the color, gamboge found in the works of Rembrandt, but there are other ways of getting yellow as well. Saffron from Spain, known as azafran. They have an annual festival. Saffron smells heavenly as well. Imagine the smell emanating, the perfume that comes from these saffron fields in Spain. But it is Iran Who is the #1 producer of saffron now? Crocus sativus. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. These fragile, fragile flowers, bluish purple with 3 crimson female stigmas and 3 yellow male stamens, which explode from the center. Stigma is the sticky part of the flower that receives a pollen. And in botanical terms, pistils, which is in the center of the flower to which the stigma belongs, is capable of taking that pollen for reproduction. Saffron blooms only once and has to be picked by noon to get the maximum potency. So what we see here are women picking saffron. But the problem for the saffron growers are mice, because in these areas, they don't have enough cats to catch the mice soon enough. The problems one faces. And because of the delicacy of the flower of picking the stigmas from here, here is a job that will never be replaced by artificial intelligence. Stamen and pistil. Saffron is also the poor man's gold for illuminated manuscripts. So they use saffron instead of the shell gold to make those marvelous documents. I love books anyway. So sitting around the table, picking the stigmas. So let's put it in terms of cost. 1 pound of saffron can cost you $5,000. The next most expensive price is vanilla. 1 pound of vanilla is $600. 5,000 for saffron, 600 for vanilla. And its expense is due to real estate. Each flower, remember, only gives 3 stigmas. It takes about 82,000 flowers. That's right, 82,000 flowers to make 1 pound of saffron. So it's quite obvious how much real estate it takes to grow the saffron. But though it's expensive to make, it's not expensive to use, because if you're cooking, you're measuring in pinches, not grams. And India is the 2nd largest producer of saffron. And these are the saffron fields of Pampore in Kashmir. And in terms of color, Kashmir's signature noon chai, the pink color, it's delicious. It's salty, it's velvety, smooth Indian tea. They make it from using these special leaves. They have milk and salt and pistachio and almonds and cinnamons and cardamoms. If you're drinking coffee, here's another option for you. And they add a little baking soda to give it that pronounced pink color. And I'm sure these fields are just as fragrant as the valleys we saw in Iran. And these lands are all disappearing because people are selling these lands to developers. So all of this is useful and also connects us to our history, because it is said Cleopatra used to bathe in saffron and milk because it was a heavenly aphrodisiac and it gave her the color yellow gold. It's apparently stimulated all the right bits, and Mark Antony is said to have died of grief over her. Perhaps it's the saffron and her golden look that helped. Who knows? But it has been proven true that saffron is also a poor man's Prozac, because if you drink a lot of saffron tea, you will be smiling. All the side things that are fun to know. Now we move on to the physics of color. Newton's theory, because we've covered so far chemistry and botany, and the third underpinning of color is physics. By intercepting a beam of sunlight with a prism, Sir Isaac Newton had proved that white light was composed of the spectrum violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red, and that they could be recombined into white light. Refraction is the bending of light when it goes from one medium to another. So when a ray of light passes through a glass prism, refraction of light occurs both when it enters a prism and also when it leaves the prism. And so this idea of refraction, his ideas of Sir Isaac Newton, helped launch the era of optics. Newton was also a genius in mathematics as well. So why am I bringing this up? It applies to how we see and use color. Skybird, the painting by Magritte. So I'm going to use it to explain why is it that we see blue so much. The sky in wings. So to explain this background, Think of an ocean and the waves crashing against the land. When they come to a huge cliff, all the waves stop. But instead of a huge cliff, if the wave encounters a rock, it's only the small waves that get affected, right? The larger waves just go over it, completely unperturbed. So if you continue that visualization, a pebble can ripple a smallest wave. So light waves are radiations from the sun. Sunlight travels in waves. And I'm qualified to speak on this because my background, as Mary said, is in electromagnetics. And so wave theories abound in color: violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. So in that light spectrum, violet is the smallest wavelength, red the largest. So when light travels through the atmosphere, the tiny molecules of oxygen and hydrogen bounce back violet and indigo, all those initial colors of blue. That is why when you look up, you see the sky is blue, because of the tiny molecules of hydrogen and oxygen. They bounce the small wavelengths back. The larger wavelengths, especially red, just go over it, just like a large wave would go over a pebble or a rock completely unperturbed. And so if you continue that thought process through, when you see spectacular sunsets, photographers take glorious sunset pictures and sunrise pictures whenever there's a volcano. That's because there's huge pollution in the sky. The crimson sunsets that people love, they're often ignorant because of the cause of that beauty. It's pollution up in the sky up there. But none of this applies until you see what nature does with it. This iridescent butterfly is a marvel of science, to speak of nothing of beauty. Most animals get their color from pigments. Not true for this morphoretinal butterfly wing. This butterfly gets the blue from light reflected by microscopic texture variations on its colorless wing scales. So this is the science of structural coloration. So in the world of animals and nature, color works on an entirely different way. It's fascinating. So for example, fish. The vision of fish is very different from what we see. On the top left, that is what a plankton eating fish sees in its UV light, because they see differently. So ultraviolet UV light can penetrate beyond 300 feet underground. The painting on the right is what we see. The painting on the left of the same situation is what a fish sees. So the color is entirely different in different species. Continuing on with that thought, sex and color. Not only do they see differently, colors change depending on the sex. And if you really follow that rabbit hole down, fish change sex in their lifetime. Some fish do anyway. This certain clownfish, it'll change sex within its own lifetime. And when it changes the sex, the bigger fish is the female one, the color will change as well. It's amazing what nature does with color. And the prototype for color is chameleons. And what they have is iridophores. So these are special skin cells that contain reflective crystals. So chameleons stretch these iridophores to change the wavelength, and thereby they change the colors they reflect. So in a very quick snapshot, what they do when they're changing colors is that they're having a color war. So the brighter the signal, the more aggression and the more aggressive is that chameleon. So this chameleon was doing pretty well, chilling out. It sees, for example, a competitor nearby, starts getting angry. One sees the color coming brighter and brighter. So this chameleon is super angry. And you see its competitor on a duller shade. So this one wins out. So this brief color battle prevents physical altercations. So there's less headbutting going on. It's a rather effective way. Color me happy. Other species that uses color in terms of sex is the Asilectus parrots, and they're in Indonesia, also in the Solomon Islands. Males are always green. The females are red. And that's because of evolution, camouflage. because the males fly from tree to tree to visit all his loves, because he has multiple loves. And so when he's flying across the canopy of green, he can hide well. Similarly, when the females hatch their eggs, they hatch it inside the hollow of a tree, which is really, really dark, and the red blends in well. So it's there for camouflage. And an example of a camouflage, which I hope you have fun, spot the owl. Do you see it? With its eyes closed, right there, camouflaged perfectly. Colors are used on so many levels. And there's a growing belief that plants see color beyond human vision also. There's a researcher, Michael Kasperbauer, who's using plastic color mulch to trick tomatoes to grow bigger and ripen early, because he believes that they sense competitors nearby through color and they ripen better. It's amazing what's being innovation out there. But to me, the essence of a color is a feeling. So again, Radha and Krishna of Indian mythology to embody that concept of the emotion of colors. Spring is coming, and Holi is the festival of colors that celebrates spring, symbolizing the season of love. Spiritually, it is celebrating the love of Radha and Krishna. So people in India, and actually nowadays in the global world, people in many parts all over the world, smear each other in riotous colors. Mother and child, friends, families, strangers alike, everywhere, all celebrating the exuberance of life. Nature celebrates in color. But this to me sums it all up. So traditionally in India, widows wear white because it symbolizes a withdrawal of sensuous pleasures. In reality, it's a way to control them and take away their economic inheritance. I dislike these practices in India, and hopefully with education, such ignorance can be dispelled. But in terms of the narrative for today, the widows celebrate Holi by being showered in flowers because they can't touch colors. So it's a riot of colors, bathed in it, yet not stained by it. And I saw this picture of this woman and I just gasped. She was widowed at age 24. This picture happens when she was about 90 years old. So imagine she had been deprived of colors for more than 60 years. So who better than her to know the significance of color? In her honor, I'm wearing white, because though she doesn't know it, and I really hope she senses it, the color she's forced to wear, white, contains within it the entire spectrum. Though she realizes probably her restrictions daily, it is in reality everyone else who's imprisoned, restricted to the few colors of the wavelength. So it really makes me happy thinking spiritually, she is colored by joy. And I wish you joy as you continue the conference today. And I'm once again so grateful for the opportunity to share the celebration with you. I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you so much.
Well, Shoma, thank you so much. What a beautiful, and I love the ending thought about the white, but thank you so much for sharing that with us.
My pleasure.
You know, one of the reasons that I was really excited about having you here is that, to me, understanding color, it really helps us be intentional about our choices and helps us understand why we might choose different colors for our paintings. So thank you so much for helping put that together, and the history, the physics, it's just tremendous. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you again.
All right, so we're going to, I think, move along here. And Shoma, I hope you would, if you would, continue on with us and stay with us if you'd like. And we will see you again. Thanks. And now we're going to come in and meet Eric Rhodes. Hi, Eric. Yep, you are muted. And how's that?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now.
All
This
right,
is great.
terrific.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I'm on vacation. I'm in a motorhome in Jupiter, Florida at the moment. So thank you for having me again. I just want to say that your organization is probably the most powerful, or one of the most powerful community organizations in the plein air movement. And applause to all of you for making that happen. That's a huge undertaking, and you're doing a great job.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's taken, I don't know, about 20, well, actually more than that, no, nearly 30 people to put this on. So definitely we have a very active community. It's terrific. And so I'm grateful that you're with us today. And thanks for taking some time out of your vacation. Obviously you're in somewhere that it's warm. I think we're all still in fleece and sweaters. So,
Yeah,
not all of us. Mm-hmm.
I'm in Jupiter, Florida.
Yep, it sounds great. Great. So Eric, I thought that we would move quickly into you so we'd have a couple more minutes. And what I was hoping is that you could just kind of give us a lay of the land these days for plein air. And the Plein Air Painters Chicago, we have people that have been painting for years. We have people in galleries and very accomplished, and we have people that are just starting. And so I'm wondering if you might be able to tell us a little bit about what's happening in plein air and how you see it in terms of art. I know you also are a publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur, so you see plein air as, I'm imagining, as one piece of art. And so if you could kind of give us a sense of all that.
I think one way to make sure to understand it is to look at the past. When I first started plein air painting, I thought there was a movement because I identified a couple hundred people who were getting together in paint in a couple of small spots, not a couple hundred collectively. And I was a little bit wrong in my estimation. We're celebrating the 10-year anniversary of Plein Air Magazine this year, but in reality, it's 13 years because we started it, launched it, got a lot of subscribers, but we couldn't get any interest in the magazine from advertisers because plein air was not considered a valid movement. Galleries would tell us that plein air paintings didn't matter. Art materials companies would tell us that it's too small of a group of people for us to target. So I tried like crazy for about 3 years, finally ended up couldn't really make it financially. So I changed Plein Air Magazine to Fine Art Connoisseur. But I always wanted to bring it back because I was a plein air painter. I heard from a lot of people who wanted it back. And so as soon as we got some meat on our bones again, and I felt like things were a little closer, I decided if I could make it from subscriptions only without any advertising, I would bring it back. So I finally did that 10 years ago. And, 10 years ago, really there was very little activity. Even 13 years ago, 14 years ago, very little activity. There were maybe 3 plein air events that I was aware of in the country. There were very, very few plein air groups. People were not getting together painting plein air very much. There were some small groupings of people here and there, but it was just not a movement. And the difference, I think, was that when we started the plein air convention of 10 years ago, and it was very small when we started. It was 300 people. Today it's 1,200 people. It was a chance for us to realize that there are people in other communities like us, and we were able to get together, make friends, develop these friendships into things that would occur where we could paint together. From that, many things were spawned. There were events. People said, well, I like this plein air thing. I think I'll start a plein air event in my town. And so it's kind of blossomed. Today, pre-COVID, there were well over 500 events nationwide. Every town, every charity, it seems as though has decided that plein air is a really great way to get their community together, to bring in a group of artists to paint for a week or 2 weeks, have quick draws, have shows, and get the community together. And so this has really morphed into a massive, massive movement. And now what's happening is it's really starting to spread throughout the world. And even though plein air painting in theory started, in Europe way before way before the Impressionists, it has really blossomed in America and is going back there. So it's fun to see this. Now we've got a big event in Ireland. There's a big event happening in France, and there's now a huge plein air movement in Spain, a giant plein air movement, mostly watercolor plein air in China, and so it's blossoming everywhere. Obviously, COVID impacted things, and most, if not all, plein air events pretty much had to shut down. And come up with some kind of a virtual alternative, much like what we're doing today. I think, though, that what will happen is, from what I can tell, we're all really anxious to reconnect in person. And I believe that based on what I'm hearing, the events will come back stronger than ever. Now, we lost some events in the middle of this. There were some events that just didn't have the right people behind them, or the right money behind them, or they just, they just couldn't survive because of COVID, and so they've shut them down, and they're not coming back. Much like we're seeing with a few galleries, there's going to be some galleries going away as well. But I think ultimately, it comes back whenever we're free, we're allowed out. I think that what will happen is these events will have more attendees than ever. The artists will be making more money than ever. There will be a higher demand for painting because people are just, they have this need to get outside, this need to communicate, to connect with people, this need to be a part of something. And as a result, I think that on the other side of this, it will be huge. So that's kind of my sense of the plein air movement. I want to mention one other thing that I think is really instrumental in the change in the movement. And that is that we're seeing artists who are buying a lot of paintings. Artists, not collectors. And also collectors. But we did just a little de facto survey at the Plein Air Convention in Tucson, this is a few years back. I asked how many people, I asked them to raise their hand, how many people purchased a painting in the last 12 months? They purchased it. They didn't trade it. They purchased it. Almost every hand in the room went up. I said, keep it up if it's 5 or more paintings. A few hands went down. And it went, it came down over a period of time. What we're realizing is that there's a huge number of artists who are buying from other artists. And it's logical because when we see something, an artist has accomplished something that we're trying to accomplish, and sometimes that's at a workshop, sometimes that's in some other form. When we see that, we want that for inspiration, and we buy those paintings. So that's one thing that's happening. The other thing that's happening is that we're seeing the collector become the artist. This has been studied recently at the Plein Air Easton. Plein Air Easton would see people over the last few years, when they started coming to these events, they would come and they would buy paintings and they would look, and they come back year after year. And then they started learning to paint, and now they're painting. Some of them are in the show, some of them not. You have to be relatively accomplished to be in some of these shows. And we're seeing this happening all over America. So what's happening is we're seeing this culture of blending of the communities, and which is really a good thing because that's going to increase painting sales. Surprisingly, it has helped painting sales. And now you have a number of people who are doing this mostly for hobby, not for profession, but people who are taking this up. We're working on a national television show. Right now we're in the midst of trying to raise close to $1 million to get the show. We have a deal with one of the networks, and our goal with this show is to see plein air painting become the hobby medium in America. The people at the network tell me they believe that this is something that people are going to really want to pick up, that after COVID, they're looking for some more meaning in their lives. They realize they've been spending an awful lot of time in their work. Now they're working from home. A lot of them are going to continue to work from home. They're going to want to get outside. And the network believes that this is going to be a blossoming of plein air painting. So we could see, you know, hundreds more events, but we could see tens of thousands, if not millions more people picking up the hobby of plein air painting. And that's going to be great for organizations like yours, where your memberships will double or triple because you're having more people who discover what this is. You know,
It certainly has happened for us. I'm wondering about what you're seeing in the art itself. Are there some changes? Is there an evolution in the art that's happening at this point?
There's always evolution in art. First off, you have a lot of sameness. You have a lot of people who are, you know, copying the ideas or the style of other people that they've studied under or that they admire. And so there's a lot of paintings that to an untrained eye might look alike. To a trained eye, you can see a difference between the level of sophistication and someone who's trying to reach that level of sophistication. But because there's, first off, there's high interest in other mediums, there's high interest in pastel, high interest in watercolor, high interest in acrylic, lots of new interest in gouache. You're seeing people trying different approaches. You're also seeing, I believe, more abstraction going on. I can't say it is or isn't a trend because I honestly don't know, but you will see, as we track the awards, the people who are winning things like our plein air salon, the people who are winning at awards at events, you're seeing more abstraction. Painters like Lon Bauer, for instance, who are much looser, big abstract shapes, and you're seeing things that are not just in the traditional plein air particular style, if you will, which is your typical green landscape painting. So you're seeing things that have more energy, more color, but there isn't necessarily a right or a wrong. And so what's nice about it is everybody's just kind of finding their own voice. And as we see new people come in, we see new ideas, and some of us like those, and so we try them, we experiment with them. And of course, as we mature as painters, we oftentimes kind of go in that direction. This happens. I study a lot of painters, and I see as they paint their whole lives, as they age, they start moving in different directions because they don't want to be bored. They don't want to be doing the same thing. They want to experiment and push the limits and try to get things a little bit more interesting for themselves, which of course also makes it interesting for the viewers.
And Eric, how about you and your own painting? How's that going? Are you painting?
Well, I painted yesterday. I took watercolor to the beach. I am not have not identified as a watercolorist, but as you know, we're holding these virtual conferences. We started out with plein air live, then we did realism live, then we did watercolor live, which was about 6 weeks ago. Watercolor live turned out to be the largest art conference in the history of art. We had massive numbers of people from all over the world, and so we had the top watercolorist on. That got me very excited about watercolor, and because there are moments like yesterday, I went to the beach. I didn't want to drag my big bag, my tripod, my oil paints. I was with my family, and so I just took a small bag with some watercolors, and I sat there on the beach doing watercolors while they were doing other things. And so I found it very satisfying. Frustrating because there are certain things you have to think differently with watercolor, but I was pretty proud of what I did. It certainly is not anywhere close to what some of the greats are doing, but it was progress, and I thought that was wonderful. So I'm painting in oil and watercolor, and my oil painting has changed a lot, has really evolved. I've been painting for 25, 26 years now. I have not had the time to devote to being able to do a painting every single day or a couple paintings a day. I get those moments in my life when I hold painters retreats, and I'll get to paint in the Adirondacks with a bunch of people for a week, doing 2 or 3 paintings a day. And when I do that, I see my work by the end of the week, my work elevates as does everyone's, because most of us don't get that opportunity. So I'm in 3 galleries now, and I think that my work is moving in the right direction, but certainly could use a little help.
I see. Well, glad to hear. I'm glad for an update on that. You know, we have about 20% watercolorists and about somewhere around that with pastelists as well, and the rest oil. But what I'm realizing too is we have a lot of people that cross over into, and many people have been talking a lot about casein and about gouache recently. So it seems like those are areas that we have folks that are working in those.
Yeah, what I like about gouache is it paints very much like oil. It dries a lot faster, but you can blend things a little bit more, and and you know, it's an opaque medium. And casein very much the same.
Mm-hmm. So, Eric, I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I'm wondering about Plein Air Live. I know that's coming up in April. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's looking like it's going to beat Watercolor Live in terms of the number of attendees, which I think is a good indication. We have we have a huge number of faculty members. Essentially, in a nutshell, what Plein Air Live is we knew we were going to have to cancel our Plein Air convention in person. The Plein Air convention has been essentially about spring training, right? We get together, we have 5 stages, 4 stages, 5 stages, depending on the venue. We have a watercolor stage, pastel stage, etc. Then we get together and we learn all day, all morning, and then we paint together all afternoon. We wanted to replicate some of that experience with Plein Air Live, and so we can't do the multiple rooms very effectively yet, but and we don't do it on Zoom. We do it in a different medium. We do have Zoom meeting components to it, and so we essentially have top artists who are doing demonstrations in most cases, some cases critiques, some cases a lecture, but mostly it's demonstrations. We have a beginner's day, which for a beginner, it walks you through how to set up your easel, what are the different components of plein air painting, how plein air painting differs from painting in your studio. And then we have someone teaching each of the mediums, watercolor, pastel, etc., so that you can look at that and say, oh, this is for me. And then if you want, if you sign up for Beginner's Day, you can just do that. And then if you want, you can hang on for the next 3 days where we have additional people teaching. And, you know, we have top masters who are teaching, and we have people teaching from all over the world. So we always have at least one a day from somewhere else in the world. We have some big names, massive names, actually, you know, Kevin McPherson, Joe McGurl, Bill Davidson, Thomas Jefferson Kitts, you know, it goes on and on and on. We just announced yesterday C.W. Mundy, and I'll tell you that I have not announced this yet, but I'll tell you guys, if you promise not to tell others, is that we're going to announce either next week or next week, the following week, Clyde Aspaveg, who is the king of all plein air painters and landscape painters, and nobody ever gets him. We had him one time at the plein air convention. It's been very tough to get him. So Clyde Aspaveg is going to be teaching. And so that's huge. This is something that doesn't happen very often. We have breakout rooms, very much like this. We get together in small groups of 8 or 10 people. We get to know each other. We compare notes. We do painting together in the evenings. We have a video where we paint from that video, so it's more like a plein air experience. And we do it for 4 or 5 days. People make lots of friends. We have vendors who are demonstrations, etc. So it's a lot of fun.
That sounds great. So, you know, we're going to have to wrap it up here, and for us to get on to our breakouts. And but Eric, thank you so much for all you do for us, really, you know, for plein air, for inspiring, for also some of our members and people that are on right now. Nancy King Mertz and Scott Tellman Powers are with us today, and people that you know well. And but thank you so much for all that you do, and we appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you. It's very kind of you to have me, and you guys keep going. You're doing a great job.
Well, thank you. All right. Thank you very much. So at this point, we're going to move into our breakouts, and what everybody has to do in just a minute, this is going to close out, and we are going to move to our breakouts. And Shoma, I saw that people were asking for questions being answered. Did you want to respond to that? We can't hear you. So Eileen, are you there to?
Perfect. Could I just answer the 2 questions I see?
No, can we do something? Because we're just now, if it'd be all right, let's get the questions to you, and I'm going to call you back after this, and we will get those to the people, if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine. They can go to the nourishmentprojects.com. It's plural. There's an email address there, or they can go through you, and
Okay.
I'll be happy to answer their questions.
All right, thank you so much. Yep, that's
Take care, Mary.
really terrific. Okay, thank you.
Take
All
care.
right, everybody, so we're going to close out this. You need to go back to pleinairpainters.chicago.com. There will be a link to one of 2 breakout sessions. And for the next 4 sessions, you're going to go to a session and choose which one you want, choose the link you want. It'll be closed out, then you'll need to select another link. So go back to, at this point, go right back to pleinairpainterschicago.com, and we will see you in the next breakout sessions. And I think we start in about 5 minutes now or so. And just go right into there, and we will, at 10:40 we start. And so you'll have a 2-minute break right now or so, and then come right back for the breakout sessions. All right, thank you. Thank you, Shoma, and thank you, Eric. See you guys in a few minutes.